Ruth, short visit on the island. What's out of nowhere? Here you are.
Oh, well, I hope it's not out of nowhere. I mean, I know that the island's facing some significant drought issues. It is quite uncharted territory for a lot of people living on the island. And for me, it's important to come over and connect with the community. I can't fix all the problems or solve all the challenges we have, particularly with regard to shipping and the cost of freight, etc. But being on the island helps me to see what's actually happening. It helps me to hear from people directly. And also to participate in discussions with a broader range of people. So it is only a short visit this time because I've got a whole heap of other commitments around this time, but the needs now, and there was an opportunity to come and attend a forum today that was really informative for me, as well as I think for a lot of the people who attended. So making the most of the opportunities, I guess, and why wouldn't you want to come here, Wade? Let's face it.
Would you suggest to other politicians you might want to come to King Island a bit more often? Yeah. Because we don't often see politicians here.
No, like I know that they were, except for the day of the show, they were particularly absent, particularly in the lead up to the election. That's all parties. I mean, the Liberals were here en masse, if you like, for the show, which, is a day that is pretty big on King Island, obviously. But I think it is a bit disappointing that we don't see more, like the Labor Party, the minor parties, independents. Except it's not cheap to get here, but this is an important part of Tasmania. So, I think there is an expectation that politicians will attend. It was good to see the Minister on one of her first engagements as new Prime Minister here on the island. I'm not sure how much time she actually spent on the island, but she was here for a period and talked to some people, and we had a meeting, I think, with at least the beef producers and possibly others. But, that's good. She'll need to spend more time over here to actually understand the very real challenges of what is normally a highly productive island that can significantly makes massive contribution to the Tasmanian economy. And all the challenges that we're facing at the moment is not just primary industries in terms of animal welfare, but also the shipping, which is an infrastructure matter. So that there's more than one minister involved in this challenge and solution.
No, I know that she only started her job last week. So,
Or beginning of this week, it might have been Wade, I think. This week. Recently, yeah.
So it's a little bit hard to already say, be on the ball there and see what happens. Now, as you said, here today, you went to one of the farms where they had a meeting. You were at the forum there. What surprised you? What did you pick up? Or was there anything that you said, I didn't even know that?
Well, I mean, as I said, Wade, I've grown up on a dairy and beef farm myself, so I had some basic knowledge as a young person, like a child and a young person, of what it is to be on a farm. But having been on a farm for many people here on the island for a long time, either here farming on King Island or farming in other places, you tend to know what you're doing. Like you've done what you've done. It's been successful. We've had some very successful years recently on King Island, like really good seasons, good growth, so high stock densities, as you would expect. And people have looked after their pasture. They've got really good growth rates, that sort of thing. And suddenly, and almost without warning, I'd say, there was a very sudden and intense drought in what has been referred to as a drought-proof island. So suddenly things that farmers have done for generations in some cases on this island aren't working or can't work because there is no water or very little rainfall, and their dams are drying up and their water supplies are drying up. It was nice to see as we fly over a little tinge of green, but a little tinge of green doesn't mean the problem's gone away. I know enough about agriculture to know that. We also know that the little tinge of green can cause all sorts of health issues with the cattle in terms of the ryegrass staggers because of the nature of the ryegrass that's grown from the soldier settlement days on the island. So there's a whole range of challenges around that. So it was really interesting and helpful for me to understand what it is that farmers need to be doing now. And part of that is, when do they fertilise now? How much do they fertilise now? What nutrients do they need to add to the soil, if anything, and when? Because one thing that I hadn't even contemplated that makes absolute sense is because there's been no rain, there'll be no leaching of the nitrogen from the fertiliser, so you probably don't need to add as much because it wouldn't have leached away. But when do you add it if there's not rain? Okay, it needs to be washed in to get up through the roots. So it was really interesting to hear from experts in the field, literally in the paddock, in the field, about how to manage through this really unusual period. And the farmers of King Island were asking some really, really good questions, trying to understand what it meant for them. And also to note that north part of the state is quite different from the south. Like, people from down south this morning arrived with very wet coats. There'd been a really heavy shower of rain. But you get to a point on the island, it's just completely dry. So the tinge of green is nice, but it's not over. And if most of the farmers have used a lot of their winter feed and fodder, then we've got to get through the winter. So this challenge is ongoing, and how do we manage through it?
Ongoing, what do you look at then? Ongoing, as it can take up to whatever time before everything could come back to normal. As you say, winter. Winter means that grass doesn't really grow, so do they still need support with feed and extra feed to get through that time? Should they sell more cattle even and reduce to minimum?
Well, this is the thing where it almost needs an individual farm approach, because every farm will have their own different challenges. Like, some are getting a bit of rain, some aren't. So it's a matter of for each property owner to understand what the needs of their land that they have is. And absolutely, there needs to be ongoing support for the island for a period. Whilst there's a bit of rain, there's a bit of growth. Once we hit the colder months, then that growth will slow down. We know that. And normally that's the time that the farmers will use their silage, their hay, whatever food they've actually stored up for their cattle over what is normally a highly productive summer season, which it hasn't been. It's not that they haven't been cutting hay or cutting silage, they have, just the yield's been right down because the growth hasn't been there because we missed the spring rains. So, yeah, there will still be a need for grain feeding potentially, other fodder to come onto the island, and potentially for some still having to destock further depending on the nature of their land.
Now, we could say this is, as a lot of farmers are saying, this is once in a lifetime. If it's once in a lifetime, within maybe 18 months, 2 years, we're sort of back to normal. If it's not once in a lifetime, if it is going to be part of the climate change that we might be prone to also, then we need a whole different approach to farming almost on King Island, isn't it?
We may need a different approach, but we also need, it highlights the need for a really reliable shipping service, because there will be ups and downs. I mean, it's the nature of climate anyway, and it's the nature of agriculture generally. So I'm sure there'll be times when we'll have good rainfalls, we'll have good seasons, even in spite of the climate change as it continues to affect the broader climate. So there will be times when we might find some farms, or the island generally, is overstocked again and needs to destock rapidly if it's a sudden change. So we need a flexible and affordable freight service to this island. And this drought has really highlighted the need for the capacity to get to the mainland of Australia, into Victoria with cattle, and also to get feed out of Victoria. We know that there's a shortage of supply of hay and silage from mainland Tassie. So if you've got to ship it via Victoria, I heard stories of cattle feed sitting on docks in Tasmania as well as in Victoria for weeks, like 8 weeks. That's a long time when you're running out of feed on the island here.
Now, government so far has provided over $700,000 in support to the farmers here on the island. Okay, we come back to the shipping, but besides from shipping, do you think that the government can do more, should do more to support farmers, or?
I think I and many people on the island are quite grateful for the support the government have given. I think if we equated what is an emergency situation on the island, because you don't have a whole range of choices about how you move cattle around, or like if you're on the mainland of Tasmania or Victoria, you could more easily move them to a variety of places. Here you're very limited on what you can do. And I think if you classify it and consider it as an emergency as it is in terms of animal welfare and the health and well-being of the farmers themselves, then if it was being treated like that as a bushfire or a major flood was, you have sometimes the Army or the Navy in to assist. So I think that there was a case here, and there has been a case, and possibly still is a case, for utilising some of these other emergency services to help clear the backlog. Even if the government put on a number of extra sailings of a suitable vessel that is reliable to bring in the fodder or whatever it is, fertiliser, fodder, or to take extra cattle off in a way that doesn't wait till the cattle are in, marginal condition, certainly before they become unshippable, then maybe we should have been talking about. But there seems to be this reluctance. Yes, they've put 2 sailings a week of vessel and line on, but that's not meeting demand. Tasports are making it, from what the conversations I've had, difficult for other shipping services to easily access the port and help with this task. They say that they've got certain operating requirements. That's maybe true, but we need to have a bit of a flexible approach here and look at how can we future-proof this island's port to ensure that if this should happen again or something similar, that we don't get caught short.
Now, you already mentioned shipping. We just had elections. You spent a lot of time over the last few years getting things done for King Island. Hey, be it support for the ambulance service, be it a new port or an extension of the port or improvement, the shipping. Okay, now we have a new government. The Premier, Jeremy Rockcliffe, back in power. He made a number of promises when he was here last, during the election campaign, but all based on a majority government. Did you ever think that they would be able to form a majority government, even now with 35 seats?
For me, it was mathematically impossible when you looked at the number of seats they could win in a couple of the electorates. I mean, they really thought, I think the Liberal Party thought they would get 4 seats in Braddon, well, they fell short there. They had to really win 3 in Clark. I don't think that was ever going to happen because they weren't going to get enough seats to make 18. Maths just didn't add up. I did note those promises all being conditional, if you like, on a majority government, which is a bit of a kick in the teeth for Tasmanians, really, because I think everyone knew it was highly unlikely we're going to have a major party of either party having a majority. But then you listen to and I acknowledge that the government and Premier certainly seem to suddenly realise all the problems I've been talking about for years and say, yes, they are real problems and yes, we'll commit to fixing them. If you listen to some of his commentary on ABC radio and other places in the media, he said that their 2030 strong plan and all the promises made under that will be honoured, and because most of them will be funded in the budget, and the Jackie Lambie Network and David O'Byrne, who's apparently signed an agreement to guarantee supply, means they support the budget. So if that's true, then we should see all of these things funded and supported in the budget. I don't think that will happen, Wade. But I'll be looking in the supply bill that we get when we get back to Parliament in May, and then the budget in September for funding for these commitments to King Island.
But then at the same time, of course, what we're ending up with is that constant stretching out, isn't it? Governments are only there for 3 or 4 years, then they're gone again in a new election, and everything looks like is sort of pushed into the future. And where do you ever get anything done? Because even for yourself, it must be so frustrating that you try to get answers, you ask your questions, and no matter what happens, and then it is all promised. But when does it happen? And okay, if we talk about the plan for 2030, should King Island maybe ask questions in 2029 so they remember in 2030?
Well, Wade, I think these problems have been well known, like the things we've talked about, the shipping service, the freight costs, the facility for an ambulance station, the community paramedic. These things have been promised, a lot of these things. Either that the community paramedic definitely been promised. Discussions about a new facility for the ambulance. Apparently that became an election commitment or recognition. It's a bit hard to tell exactly what it was. But these things shouldn't. We've known about them for years. We've asked about them for years. They've recognised them in their election rhetoric and commitments or promises or whatever you want to call them. So when we get back to Parliament, and yes, it is very frustrating. We last sat in, well, you can't count the December setting. It was a schmozzle. We last sat in November. It'll be May before we sit again. All that time lost in actually holding the government to account to say, where are these promises? Where are these commitments you've made? You've said you recognise these challenges. Well, I want to see action. So, yeah, I look forward to getting back to Parliament to start to really rattle some cages again. And I do believe that it's a bit hard for me to know whether it's a Minister for Infrastructure or Transport who now has carriage of the port. I think it's infrastructure still, which means Ferguson. But so he needs to come over again. His party has made commitments around support for this island, and yes, giving some money right now in the middle of a crisis is fine, and would be done for any community in crisis. But let's see some long-term solutions to fix the problem that they have acknowledged exists.
Well, I guess one of the key things is that in this situation now, we had it a few times now, they can't blame the previous government.
They haven't been able to blame the previous government for a little while now, but it was interesting, like during the election campaign, the main scare campaign was, let's avoid a Labor-Green coalition, or coalition of chaos, they called it, or, suggested it would be. But no, that you can't blame anyone other than the Liberal government for not addressing these matters. They were the ones who bought that boat on special and then had to spend money to fix it up. They were the ones who decided that they wouldn't actively engage with Group 6 metals around use of the overburden, to this point anyway. They were the ones who've had it raised with them for years about the need now for a dedicated volunteer ambulance service, a station, or rooms and training rooms. They were the ones who have had all these matters raised with them, and they are the ones who need to get on and do the job. And I hope the Jackie Lambie Network candidate, or now member, for Braddon, finds her way over here too to fully understand the matters, because she'll be the one that'll be holding the pressure on the government. Obviously, they've signed an agreement to support the government, but she needs to really inform herself about what it is that this island needs.
Is that a hope or a wish, or...?
I'll be speaking to her about that. No, it's an expectation, Wade. It's not a hope or a wish, it's an expectation. I would expect the people of King Island would expect that too. She's been elected in Braddon to represent the people of Braddon, stand up for them. Craig Garland too. He's an elected member of Braddon. This is in Braddon. He needs to inform himself about the very real challenge that the island face. And all members of Braddon, and myself as the member for Murchison, are funded to fly here. Okay, the taxpayer pay for my flights here. So that's why I like to come and stay a few days, because it's expensive to get here. And I'm only staying one night this time, to be honest about that, of course, because I have other commitments. But we are funded to service the island. There is no excuse for not coming over and meeting the people on the ground and hearing from them directly about what the real challenges are.
Do you think that we can find changes? And I know it's a statewide problem almost, but we feel it even more here on King Island. The cost of living, we all talk about increasing the population, but not a lot of houses available, or it is too expensive. For ordinary jobs, to find a rental place that is, affordable for anybody with an ordinary job, a normal job, let's call it that. But what can we do there? Is that going to be a battle forever, or...?
Well, I mean, the cost of living is affecting everyone across the whole of Australia and probably many parts of the world for that matter. But on King Island, that's amplified, and that's partly because of the freight costs, but also the shortage of housing availability and the cost of building or any sort of renovation even of a house that or home you might be able to do up or modernise to attract people to it. And there's just a shortage of housing generally. So this is another reason why the other members for Braddon need to be over here and familiarise themselves with the actual challenges. Go to the supermarket, go and do yourself a shop and see how much it'll cost you compared to what you might be able to the same basket of goods, if you like, from a supermarket in Burnie or Devonport or Smithton. Get a real awareness of the real challenges here. We all know that there are shortages in teachers, health professionals, childcare workers, dairy hands, every tradie there's a shortage of. That's amplified over here. It's harder to attract people to our regional areas, and acknowledging that there are challenges everywhere in all these professions, the challenges are magnified here and perhaps need a different approach. We've got to have housing. We've got to have decent housing here to attract health professionals, to attract teaching staff, to attract our police officers, all those really important and critical roles we rely on. But that can't come at the detriment of a farmer trying to attract workers to the island, or a business trying to attract workers to the island. So there has to be a really whole of community approach to this, and the only way to fully understand it is to come here and be here and to see it. I always prefer to go to a place and actually immerse myself in it a bit to actually fully understand it. It's easy to look at a map, talk to people on the phone, but it's not the same as being here. And I think the very real challenges need to be understood if we're actually going to make a difference in them.
King Island is a lot more than just statistics.
Correct. And whilst we can put some really good statistics forward about the economic output of this little powerhouse of a gem of Tasmania, but it is much more than that. And the people are what make it that. So you need to meet the people where they're at. That's my challenge to the others.
Good talking to you, Ruth Forest. Thank you.
My pleasure. It's always beautiful to be here, Wade.